I think the fact that you retire at 60 was another strange thing for me, because it's like, till 59 years and 364 days, you're absolutely fine. And then suddenly you're not good to work anymore, which is, I think, a strange notion of putting an expiry date on people, which is factually incorrect. People still have a lot to give, regardless of what their age is, and they continue to give in different ways.
Hello, listeners. My name is Mridvika, and this is Just an Ordinary Mom podcast. I really am just an ordinary mom to twin boys with a high speed career, and this podcast is to tell the stories of ordinary moms doing extraordinary things. On the show today, I speak to Priyanka Gothi, who is building a human centric digital marketing agency for purpose driven organizations called Tailworthy. Priyanka holds an undergraduate degree in journalism and mass communications and an MBA in marketing from SP Gen. She spent a decade in various roles at Nestle before venturing out into freelance work as a brand and communication strategist. She also founded a social impact organization called Wise at Work, a disruptive job platform connecting skilled retired professionals with part-time work opportunities to create impact for businesses and communities. Last year, her project was merged into an academic curriculum at a graduate level course at an international university. On the show today, she talks about the learnings she drew from working with iconic brands at Nestle to challenging the old school concept of jobs not being linked to the life stages but ages. She also talks about how saving her identity at work first helps her to be a good mother, and how it's super important to raise the bar for what the definition of good men in the society today looks like. Welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Mridvika, for calling me. I'm really happy to do this across a screen and a podcast today.
Great. Priyanka, why don't we start with you telling me a little bit about your growing up years, and what did your parents do? Where did you grow up? What were some of your hobbies that shaped you as the person that you are today?
Sure. So I am an out and out Delhi girl, but basically a Gujarati living in Delhi is never a Delhiite, neither is she ever a Gujarati. So I've always been a little bit of out of place everywhere. I come from a very professionally charged family. Everyone is like very educated. My dad's a doctor, my mother's a teacher. So the impetus was always for my sister and I to be one, like study as much as you can, like a very nice Asian family that we are, and be financially independent. I think those are the two things that were constantly drilled in our head, that as women, you need to study hard, excel in what you're doing, and make sure you're not depending on anybody for money. So I think that has sort of stayed with me, and it sort of guides me in whatever I'm doing in many ways. I think we're very lucky and blessed to have parents who never push down any of their desires, like you should be a doctor only, or you should be whatever. In fact, my dad was like, find anything that is calling you, and we are here to support you. So we were very free-willed. We were allowed to pursue whatever. My sister did maths honors, and I did journalism and mass communication. So it was all very different based on what was sort of something that we could relate to more and what was our calling. And I think my journey for sort of following my calling has been an ongoing one, and I believe it's not something I'm going to find an answer to like that. We've been allowed to explore. I think that has sort of allowed me to be free. Like I'm not afraid of failure as much, because it is a lot about the journey and the exploration itself. So growing up, we take part in all sorts of extracurricular activities. We were like always the kids to stay back after school, and we were in the theater club and the music society and the anything except for sports basically was happening.
What prompted you to pursue education in journalism, given you had your dad look up to as a doctor? What was the inspiration behind taking your education in that direction?
I was always very interested with the various mediums of communication and how you can tell a story. I think telling a story is such a big art, and you learn how to tell it in you can tell it in different ways. There are some that really stay with you, and as a child when you're reading books, be it like the Enid Blittons and so on, they really pull you into this world and completely sort of want you to be a part of it in a way. It's such an immersive experience, storytelling. And that has always fascinated me, irrespective of the medium that we were talking about. Even my dad, like he's a doctor, but he's an excellent storyteller. So what was most interesting to us were all of the stories of these patients and their lives and their stories that he'd tell us. So more than the medical profession, which I hugely admire, what really makes him an excellent doctor or a really interesting doctor is the way he's able to articulate all of those things. So I think, and I mean, growing up, like I was telling you, I was amongst the 3 or 4 people in school who'd always be called around to sort of, if there's a play, you need to sort of MC something, there's a script, there's Teacher's Day, you got to figure this out. So we were always that gang of 4 girls who'd stay back for extracurriculars and for no other reason. So we were like the theater nerds in school. And that kind of always sort of in my head told me that I needed to move towards the arts direction. I was not going to enjoy science so much. I tried to pursue that as much as possible. So that's what led me to journalism and mass communication, which I thought would expose me to, what else is out there.
Yeah. Did you want to become a reporter or a correspondent taking the news to the world? Or did you sort of see your career unfolding on the corporate side?
I didn't see it either. It wasn't like that. I think I did enjoy the reporting and the journalism aspect of it, because we did have to work with a newspaper and do reporting and on ground. But things that I enjoyed more were in the space of creative storytelling and, more of the world of advertising and how those kind of stories are told, or how you sort of make people believe in the power of one idea and simplify a very complex thing, but sort of help people understand things really easily. So advertising really attracted me a lot. And from the advertising communication is how I landed into a corporate sort of a space where, again, I think despite whichever role they put me in, I'd bring in some piece of communication in it. Because even if I was in sales, I'm like, we need better messaging for our sales officers. So it just became a part of who I am. I want to try and build it to everything because it does have a lot of value, and I think I perform better and I'm able to deliver on whatever the organization needs as well, based on those skills as well. So yeah, that's how my corporate journey at Nestle began.
Did you meet a lot of people in your network or role models, around to understand what advertising world really looked like before you went down that route?
So I actually interned in an ad agency for a while. I was a copywriter. That was really interesting as a experience, and you sort of see firsthand what it takes from like a client's business brief to sort of turning it into a communication outcome and making sure that it works. It's creatively engaging, it emotionally is compelling, and helps to tell a story that you'd remember. I did that for a few months, and then I went on to do my MBA from SPJ in Mumbai, where I got to do more of that and also see things from a business side, because I do enjoy understanding why you need to tell a story as well. And you can't do that without understanding what the business wants to do. So I think doing an MBA in marketing helped me gain perspective and work with organizations. I mean, while at SPJ, I interned with Hindustan Times and a lot of social impact organizations as well, which is sort of where the next part of my journey comes from, which sort of really interested me on what is really important for a business and what are the gaps in which they're unable to tell a story or can tell it really powerfully.
Yeah, you started your career with Nestle and grew up the ranks of a corporate journey. And then you stayed on with them for almost a decade. Tell me a little bit about your years at one of the largest consumer companies in the country, and you were leading their communications, digital and content strategy, and everything in between. What were some of your learnings through these years, Priyanka?
I think any large organization, and Nestle included, is like a big school for all of the young people who sort of join it, right? Like you're all dreamy-eyed and you have an idea of what it's like to work, and you suddenly realize that there are so many moving parts in an organization. It's insane. So when we joined Nestle as a management trainee, there's the year-long management trainee program that we had where we had to spend 6 months sales, where I was like, sent to the hinterland of Tamil Nadu, not even Chennai, and figure out like how to sell products to people who don't even speak your language, to actually then spending about a couple of months in one of the coffee factories, which was about 200 kilometers from Mysore. Beautiful place, but I would have never gone there and known what exists there. And to see how product is actually manufactured, the kind of quality control that goes into creating a product consistently, delivering on the same taste repeatedly over decades and centuries, actually, in some cases. And then, of course, coming back to like, say, product marketing and understanding how do you create new products or continue to create engagement around these. Some of these products are like hugely loved, right? Nestle is the house of some of the world's most incredible brands. You've got Maggi and Kit Kat and Nescafe and so on. So how do you preserve and continue the love that these much loved national global brands have, as well as trying to create new innovation and trying to see how do we do something better, how do we deliver on new customer needs, and how do we become more user-centric in our approach. So the power of consumer research, understanding how you need to sort of understand this vast amount of data and sort of see how you can create valuable propositions for people at the right time in their life journey was something that you, I think, learn a lot when you work in an organization like Nestle. Also, yeah, great bunch of people, really kind-hearted, so always will have fantastic memories of working there. And I got to travel the country and the world.
Yeah, no, as consumers, we rarely put like any thought into the fact that, the coffee that gets delivered to us or a piece of chocolate that we eat has so much of hard work gone behind in making sure that it touches our lives and it touches our hearts. Any specific product or a story from those days that you can recall that had a lasting impression or impact on your journey with them?
I mean, so there were iconic brands that we were working with, right? So many stories. Nescafe was a brand that I was on for quite a while. And what we realized was that, like, coffee in India is not like coffee abroad. Like, it's not that people are waking up to cups of coffee. Very different between the south and the north of India. Like, there's a chai culture and there's a coffee culture. And also within coffee in the south, there is like a filter coffee culture and a different type of a flavor. So there's a huge need to generate demand for coffee still. And what we did was we started this massive sampling program to sort of get people to taste their first cup of coffee. It was in some of the tier 3, tier 4 cities in the 4 southern states. And just running that program, seeing what it's like to put up a literal mela in every city, such a fascinating experience. We were on ground for most of it. In fact, I remember I had one of my bosses who'd say, always work in a city where there's no airport. So we used to be literally going like 500 kilometers away from the nearest city to the airport to, like, that's where your audience is sitting, and just to meet them and understand what they really need, whether they even care, right? At the end of the day, everyone's got such a busy and such a stressful life. How do you make them care? That was definitely extremely interesting. Another thing that was really interesting at Nestle was we started the process of digital transformation really early on, I think in 2011 and 12, where it was still sort of early days for like Facebook and social media. So we set up an entire digital acceleration team, as we called it, which was in-housed, an entire team of people who were listening to what our consumers were talking about real time. We had like these screens across the wall, so we'd monitor what they were saying on social media. We try to understand the sentiment. We'd respond real time with a content studio that was producing content real time and sort of help brands be more contextual, more present, and more sensitive to what consumers want. So that, I think, that experience of setting that up and running that operation was absolutely brilliant.
Amazing. I can only imagine, like, I'm just getting visuals of like a really big control room with big screens where you're monitoring and doing social listening on what people are saying about the brands. And it's just fascinating. You and I met almost, I think, a decade ago when I was looking for freelance consultants for an assignment to do retail fundraising strategy at one of my previous organizations. And by then you had moved on to independent consulting. How did you take your career in that direction? Did you want to intentionally go slow, or was corporate too much for you to handle then?
No, on the contrary, I think I was ready to explore the next is what phase in my life. I think I really enjoyed being at a corporate, but I wanted to see what else is out there. And like I was telling you, even earlier on, I've never been afraid of exploring and experimenting because I'm very happy with the journey. I'm not a very like, I need a car by 30 and I need a house. Like, of course, that's very important, as my husband constantly tries to remind me. But it's not been the goal. The goal is really to go in for the experience. And I think there was a time where I think everyone sort of hits this sort of, am I getting enough out of it? Or have I gained everything that I had to gain out of this experience? And for me, there was a point where I felt like, okay, I've done a lot of amazing things, but I'm really ready to see what's outside this world. I felt like I was in this cocoon for a really long time, like straight from college into an organization, and you're protected by an organization, right? Like a large organization, you're behind layers of defenses. And I felt like in a little bit of a risk-taking mode, which I thoroughly have enjoyed since doing that, and decided to go on a year-long exploration of trying to figure out my next is what. So I had actually started writing a blog around that then. It was called Girl Cut Loose, which I wrote for 185 days very religiously, after which I stopped writing. But there was a bucket list of things that I wanted to re-explore in my career. Like, for example, working with a non-profit. I had always been interested in that space, but never had the opportunities to, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to write creative content for television and cinema, so I wanted to explore that space. So there were a couple of things that were on my mind, and I wanted to get started. So I said, why not do this now and just trust your instinct and go for it. It was quite nerve-wracking to do that because I was extremely comfortable, both financially as well as, you're secure, you've got a job, you're comfortable. But yeah, getting uncomfortable, I think, really helped me to start trusting my own instincts. And I think that's something that's extremely important as an entrepreneur. And I think in general, we forget to rely on them so often. And that's been a big learning over the last couple of years.
Yeah, tell me about the TV serial script that you were working on. What kind of storyline was that?
So this was for the biggest television channel in India. They ran a prime-time crime reality show, which I think a lot of people do watch still. And I was commissioned to write a couple of episodes for that, which got made, which had my name on it at the end, but they were as massy as you can expect them to be. So I'll be happy to share a link with you later on, but it's not something that I want to talk about too much. So the experience of it, though, was so interesting, right? Like, because that was like my first gig out of like a corporate job. And suddenly, from being on the side of the organization, you were a vendor and you were selling a service and you were selling a product. So the tables had turned situation was quite real, and you realized, okay, this is difficult. Like, working and selling your skill is difficult. Getting paid for your work is difficult. There are a whole lot of things that you don't realize when you get paid salary, regardless of whether you're turning up to office or not.
Priyanka, I've always known you to be a very creative and an enterprising woman, and you've never given up on the idea of working and being financially independent, even though you freelanced for a year. But there were organized projects that you've taken up over the years that have made sure that no one takes you for a ride and like you are not lowballed, for the next thing that you give yourself to. You were still in India, I remember, and you started this organization called Retired Not Out. And it was, I think, to help retired folks find part-time opportunities. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of building such a unconventional organization and then spend meaningful time trying to build on that idea.
So the idea of Retired Not Out basically came from my mom. She has been a working professional all her life. She was a teacher, retired around that time in 2016, I think. She retired as a teacher after working for about 3 decades. And I think for the first time, a lot of my notions of what retirement means were challenged significantly, because I thought it was great. She's free to do whatever she wants. But people tend to lose control of their life because working has been such a big part of your life and it's given you such a sense of purpose that when that thing is taken away from you, it impacts your identity, it impacts your financial independence, it impacts your confidence. And I think we often, as younger people, think that it is great and we look at it with a very different lens versus what it really is like when you're in that situation. So I saw her going from being an extremely confident, woman. She was heading the primary division of the school, suddenly being unhappy and disinterested and trying to figure out, like, dabbling in a few things, not sure what she wants to do. I think the fact that you retire at 60 was another strange thing for me, because it's like, till 59 years and 364 days, you're absolutely fine. And then suddenly you're not good to work anymore, which is, I think, a strange notion of putting an expiry date on people, which is factually incorrect. People still have a lot to give, regardless of what their age is, and they continue to give in different ways. They may want to sort of be more flexible with their work, which is absolutely acceptable. But our approach on jobs and careers not being linked to life stages, in fact being linked to ages, is, I think, very old school thought, and we really needed to challenge that. And that's where I decided to create a platform for people over 50 to upskill and help them find work opportunities, both flexible as well as full-time. And we later rebranded that to Wise at Work, because we realized that people don't like to be called retired. They feel that it's, oh, but I'm not retired, or it makes them feel old. So there was a lot of sensitivity that I had to learn and I had to understand about this community, which I didn't have, in terms of the language to use, what is right, how do you approach this segment, which is largely underserved by most brands and communities. And I only looked at from the lens of these old, desperate, financially independent people who can't take care of themselves, or people who are sick. I mean, if you Google a picture of somebody who's over 60, you will find people who look like they're on a bed, on a hospital bed, people who are sick, etc. So you won't find an independent, happy person or progressive looking person on any of the images. The bias is so deeply entrenched in us. So that's where the genesis of the idea came in.
And what was the reaction you got from employers that you were trying to change the mindsets of? Were they very welcoming of the idea? And did some of the people who landed on your platform, were they able to find meaningful work opportunities?
So initially, I think age discrimination is not a very popular form of discrimination. Like, it's not popularly spoken of. You speak about gender equity a lot. You speak about racial diversity. But age is not something that we talk about, which is strange because it's going to affect 100%. Like, everyone is going to get old, definitely, regardless of whether you're a white male as well, right? And this form of discrimination is rampant. It is so deep rooted in how we hire people, how we train people, how we promote and engage employees, how we transition them into new opportunities, that it's very hard to change behavior. And there are a lot of preconceived notions about what this cohort of individuals can do. So most organizations think that if you're looking at placing older people, we have some positions for guards in our building, or somebody who can do like 2 hour like a newspaper collection thing, or they can volunteer with somebody, or they can just be sitting at our bank front desk for 2 hours in the afternoon when someone's taking their lunch break. People don't think of themselves as legitimate talent at all. They think that, it's going to be difficult to get in someone who's older, who has less tech expertise, who may find it difficult to work with younger people, etc. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why they don't get all of the opportunities that they need. There's also a big reason in terms of insurance and not being able to support, say, medical insurance for your employees, which may be a mandatory requirement for your organization, right? And you can't insure somebody who's over 60, 65. So there were a lot of these preconceived notions, but we started working very closely with a lot of organizations and training them on how to build flourishing multi-generational teams. And I'm happy to say we actually placed 250 people over the last 5 years. I mean, we launched in 2017, and from then to 2019, actually, we placed 200 people in full-time, part-time, and contract roles with large organizations like, some of the biggest banks in the world, to smaller agencies as well, in jobs where most of them are still around doing the same thing. So it's
amazing. And the thing is that this problem that you tried to tackle is not just very specific in the context of India. I think it's a very universal problem. And when you had to move to Hong Kong with your husband for his work, you continued to build on this organization and rebranded it from Retired Not Out to Wise at Work. Did you find a lot of differences in the way you had to change the perception and behavior of the employers at large as compared to how you experienced that in India?
So before I moved, I actually contacted a lot of people in Hong Kong trying to figure out if there was a market for it. And interestingly, Hong Kong was one of those regions of the world where 30% of their population is already over the age of 60 and 50% of their population is over the age of 50. So they are facing an imminent labor crisis because they're sort of seeing a lot of people move out of the active economy. They're finding ways to actually get labor into the economy to work and, take jobs and train them. So it seemed like a good place to sort of try it out. It's a very small part of the world, but considering it is fairly cosmopolitan and has a diversity of talent. And I think a lot of people there are really interested in driving the D&I agenda. It seemed like it would have been easier, but you're absolutely right. Ageism is everywhere. Surprisingly, the most developed nations in the world are some of the most ageist ones. But that's the challenge, right? It's a conversation not too many people are having, but an important one to have.
And now this organization has been consumed as an academic project. How is it still continuing to do the wonderful work and service the idea that you started, Priyanka?
So I think the form that it exists in now is essentially to upskill older adults so that they are well equipped to find roles that will best help them deploy their abilities and also make them extremely useful to organizations and make them an attractive talent pool. So here now they're sort of engaging with younger students, and there's a cross-pollination cross-pollination of skills happening on both sides, where students learn from them as well as they learning from the students. We also try and find placements for them, but it's honestly post-COVID, diversity has taken a back seat, not just for ageism, but across the spectrum. So that has been a little bit of a challenge over the last few years. But we've become more voluntary in nature and are trying to support anyone that we can through our network and contacts, and help them sort of find the way to their next career.
So today, Priyanka, you're back in Delhi. You moved back from Hong Kong a few months ago, and now you run a full stack content and digital marketing and communications agency based out of Delhi. Tell us more about how did that shift come about, and what do you do today in your new role?
So this was around the COVID start of 2020 when it really started to hit home that something big had happened beyond, all of our expectations. Wise at Work immediately stopped making a lot of money. Like whatever our revenue sources were dried up within a span of 3 months, and our team of the small team that we had to sort of be downsized even further. And it gave me a glimpse into the fact that this was not going to be a revenue generating business anymore. And while I wanted to continue to support the community, and we still do, it's not something that's going to be financially viable in the short term, because one, the challenge of changing behaviors is a long-term game. It's one of those, slow cooker things. You just put them on to boil and let it boil for 12 hours. Like it's a dal makhni recipe, not noodles. So I wanted to sort of also be pragmatic about, how as a family am I continuing to contribute financially, and is there anything else that I can do leveraging the experiences that I have had, both as a marketer as well as a social entrepreneur. And when this transition with the university was happening, I was speaking to them and seeing if they could use this as a project, I started to meet other social entrepreneurs that the university was incubating, and they all wanted help with their marketing and their brand comms. And I'm like, listen, I can do this for you. Like, I can raise my hands. I've done this for a fair amount of time. And that's where it started. It started in a very organic way. I didn't think I was going to make a company out of it. But about 2.5 years now to us getting our first client, we now have a team of 4 people. The company is called Tailworthy because we want to tell stories of companies that are worthy of being told. Like I say, we want to work with, impact entrepreneurs, people who are trying to change the world and push it in a more positive direction, because I think everyone desperately needs positivity considering how grim the world has become lately. So our clients are working in the space of environment, positive climate action, gender equity, financial education for women and the underserved, STEM and AI education for the underserved kids. We're working with soap recycling companies and foundations that actually help promote social entrepreneurs as well. So it's basically a set of folks with, I guess, an underlying similar ideology of, listen, we've got to do this on our own. No one's helping us. We're going to have to seize this and figure out how to make a dent. And the only thing that I want to do is help them tell their stories louder and better so that they're heard, because I think there's so many of the others who have so much more money than them and stories that may not necessarily be healthy for this planet and for our lives, who can pump in the resources. So we want to sort of cut through that clutter with positive storytelling and smart digital marketing tactics, which would help these companies grow.
Great. Priyanka, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about how motherhood entered your life and how it changed you as a person, like it does to most of us. So you've got 2 kids now who are 6 years apart. One is 7, the other is 2. Tell me a little bit about your own journey as a mother that you think has changed something in you as a woman.
I think motherhood is always like the first and the second time that I've become a mother. It's been such a reflective time for me as an individual in my life on what was important to me and what really mattered to me. So my first switch from Nestle actually happened when I became a mom for the first time, because I was like, I can keep doing the same thing. I've got to do something better and push myself further. So unlike a lot of people who take a step back, I'm the one to sort of lean in and tumble over. So like a little insane that way. But I think it really makes you very reflective, or at least has for me, made me very reflective about my life choices and the choices of those around me, and what is my role to play in the world that we are creating today. We can't keep finding other people to sort of hook the blame on or asking them to be answerable. I think we all are answerable ourselves, and we need to sort of stand up and take responsibility. So being a mother has really propelled that sort of thing in me. It wasn't there before, to be honest. And it's also, helped me enjoy the little joys in life and really sort of understand what is it like to learn, right? Like you see your kids learning and you see this one day that they can't read a sentence and the second day they're reading a full page on a book, and it's that exhilaration of being able to teach and the ability to see that learning happen inspires you to learn as well. Like, what's stopping us from like joining a piano class? Like, why can't I join Chinese with you? Like, I think it's great to be a kid, but it's great to stay in a learning mindset for your life. And I think, being a mother really does, but also makes you paranoid. It's not all rosy. It's crazy, as you know yourself. Makes you a little crazy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so I am not generalizing this, but like for the most women who choose to work, they typically run two jobs, one outside the homes and the second shift is at home. Men supporting and playing an equal partner is sometimes an exception than a norm. So once you had your kids, how did this play out for you? Was it on the exception side, or was it more like you had to find your own rhythm with your life partner to live this journey of parenthood together?
See, I think it's very important to understand that it's not just the mother's child. It is the father's and the mother's child, or whatever the two parents that the kids have. It's their child. So a father trying to help out with raising the kid is just nonsense in my world. Like, you can't help out. This is your child. Like, do it. This is your job. So my husband's been great at, sort of giving me the runway to do what I have to do and giving me the space to try these new things and build these new businesses, grow. And I'm very fortunate to have him. But there are occasions where only a mother will do. And I think a lot of times we find ourselves in situations where you have to be present and you have to sort of let go of what you may have been doing and take on more emotional and whatever physical responsibility of the child. To be honest, it's a balance that's very hard to strike. It's an everyday struggle. There are days where you get it right and then there are days that completely get messed up. But I think it's an ongoing journey. I think it does get better. You do get a sense of this whole parenting act as well. Nobody trains you for it, right? You have to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I complain about that all the time. We are taught to solve integration and differential problems, a concept that we would never, ever use in our real lives, unless obviously you are a scientist and building something at scientific institutions of research. But I also want to touch upon the topic of realness of motherhood, right? It's not always magical and life-changing. And there are times when, and it's true for me, like 5 times a month, I think, wait, why did I choose to become a mother? And so I just wanted to understand a little bit from you, how does the maternal instinct sometimes take a backseat and your own personality as a woman first come out when it comes to being a mother?
It's a constant struggle, right? Like keeping your identity alive and thriving while being a good, responsible mother and taking care of your kids and being interested in their life is a lot. And I mean, 5 times is too less. I think about it every day often, right? It's like, why did I have them? Like, you see your friends who don't have kids. I'm like, just don't go down that line, because it is a simpler life. I wouldn't have it any other way now. But, I think it is a lot that takes out from you, both physically in terms of the actual time that you end up spending in different things, but also draining you emotionally, and how much time are you left with for your own self. And this whole me time thing, I mean, it's a luxury, right? As you go along, there is no concept of it with a 2-year-old walking into every time you enter the toilet as well. Like, it's like, listen, just give me a moment. But I think it's seizing those moments that keep you sane. And for me, working very, very actively and being super busy has kept me sane. I know that if every time I sling into just the mother role, I fail and I feel disappointed. I cannot be just one of those two things. I need my identity to remain strong and thriving and happy for me to be a good mother. And that for me works really well, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Now my kids know that the days that I'm working and busy, that I'm happier, and the days that I'm just sitting around, I feel I'm just not a nice person those days. So yeah, it's about trying to see what you need to stay sane and to stay happy and motivated, and that makes you work harder and it makes everything else so much easier. Plus, kids seeing their parents work, I think they learn so much from what is really needed in life, and you don't just get handed things. So yeah, that's important.
I think it's a good segue into my next question, Priyanka. You're raising boys, and I think a lot of responsibility of changing the conversation around the social conditioning that boys of yesteryears grew up with falls upon the mothers of today to make sure that they are equipped with life skills like making their own breakfast and food and cooking a meal and keeping the house clean and everything else. How are you playing that role in their lives today? Are you making them independent to go? The younger one I know is very small, but how about the older one?
Yeah, so this is a big challenge, right? Like, I never thought I'd be a mom to two boys. So it's a bit too much pressure on how do you raise good boys, because we all know that there aren't enough of them. I also think that the bar for what a good man or a good boy is so low in this country and generally across the world that even if he just like puts his plate in the sink, it's like, what an excellent human this person is. So raising the bar for what is decent and the right thing to do, and being an active participant in the household is a very important part of our family. It's something that we want to sort of inculcate in the boys, that you're not just here to eat and sleep and watch TV. You've got a job to do in running this household as well. I'm not asking you to go find a job right now, but you've got to wash your own dishes and clean the table and water the plants and whatever it is that you can do in your ways, and incentivizing them when possible to encourage them to do it. The older one has thankfully started becoming fairly independent, like not just himself, but also taking care of his younger brother and the household in general, like making sure things are tidy and clean when, people are coming over, cooking his own breakfast on a Sunday, trying new recipes out. I think it's absolutely essential to raise boys that understand that running a house is a two-person or a whatever more job. It's not just going to be on the spouse to like cook me a meal, and definitely respect for anyone who works, right? Like all of the people who support our ecosystem, right? None of us can operate without all of the aunties and the helpers who come and sort of do work. So how do you make sure that you respect the job that they do and learn how difficult it is to actually get that done? I think needs to be sort of constantly explained, because we want to raise empathetic boys who understand the value of hard work and the importance of participation and what it looks like. So yeah, that's an ongoing journey.
Priyanka, what is that one piece of advice that you would give to another woman who wants to have gratifying career while feeling that she's been a reasonably successful mother if she chooses to be one?
I'd say just shut that guilt driving box in the corner and throw it in the ocean. That is that one thing that holds so many amazing mothers back all the time. Get help when you can get help. Don't think that you can like superhero it, because honestly, for all of the lean in conversation, I think it's really unfair to put all of the impetus on women to lean in. Where is the lean in book for men? I'm sorry to say it, but it really shouldn't be all women leaning in and bending their back, upside down just to get things sorted. Get the help you need. Demand your partner or your spouse to actively work in the house and look at this as part of his or her daily responsibility as they would a job description, right? Like, this is your role. Like, you should know what you've signed up for. Yeah, without being like really nasty like I'm sounding, but I would say it's really important to ask for what you want and get it, because if you don't ask, no one's going to hand you anything in a platter. And I think every time I've asked, it somehow does manifest itself as well. So just make it happen for yourself and keep your identity alive. I think that really makes us all happier. We weren't born mothers. We were born women. We were born with our own aspirations and our own dreams. And it's extremely important to keep them alive in whichever way that you can. No one's asking everyone to run an IPO business, but at least just get out there and see what it is that makes you happiest and keep that as a part of your life. Yeah, that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for being part of this conversation. I had a lot of fun and I drew a lot of insights, and I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy listening to you as well.
Thank you so much, Mridvika, for having me over. Really enjoyed talking to you as usual.
And that was the episode of Just an Ordinary Mom podcast. If you're an ordinary mom or know someone who could benefit from listening to this podcast, do share it with them. This podcast was recorded at Manic Pod Studio in Chembur. Our sound engineer is Shrey Tiwari and our producer is Vedant Nayak. Thank you for listening.